Hey class, Doug Brown here. Welcome to a new week. Getting close. We're week 5, almost finished with the course. An introduction to Homeland Security. It's basically what the course is, just sort of a baseline in the different components of Homeland Security, different structures, different divisions and departments. As we enter week 5, before I discuss that, let me just say thank you for a great job. You've worked really hard to learn more about the Department of Homeland Security, each component of Homeland Security, and you've really given it your all to move forward with the discussions, and you've done a fantastic job. So, way to go. I'm proud of each one of you for moving forward and doing such a good job in the course. What are we doing this week? This week we are discussing some areas that I always like to work with, and that, my friends, is hazards mitigation, prevention, and preparedness. Now, the one thing you'll learn, and I have discussed this a bit in my announcement, there's really no such thing as a natural disaster. I know the material says that. However, as scientists, we have worked hard to try to change that. You'll see that in the newer textbooks as they go to publishing, go to print. And the reason that we say that is because there's hazards. There's really no natural disasters. Disaster must involve humans. Everything involving the disaster, it must affect humans, or it involves humans in some way. And so thus, if we take the people out of the risk, it's really just a hazard. And those things do occur naturally, but the reason that people are affected is because we do something or we don't do something, which brings us to our conversation this week. What's mitigation? There's different parts of mitigation, pre and post, pre-disaster, post-disaster mitigation, all associated with that hazard. So currently more money is put into post-disaster mitigation versus pre-disaster mitigation, although the Trump administration is currently exploring making a change with this because it makes more sense to spend the money on the front end before a disaster occurs, before that hazard affects the community, than after. But human beings were reactive instead of proactive, and as such, we don't do a lot of things until something has occurred, and so then that's when we're able to get money, because we can present to the federal government, to the state government, etc., that money is needed because of X, because this happened in the past. It's easier for us to go, for a community emergency manager to go to the federal government, the state government, and write those grants and seek that funding, because we can demonstrate the need. Pre-disaster mitigation theoretically has been harder to get money because it's difficult to convince leadership that something might occur, even though we may have the data to support it. It's difficult to get that data on the front end unless we go out and research and we identify those hazards. But those tools, traditionally those tools weren't there, but now we have those tools, such as using ArcGIS, HAZUS, MARPLOT, some of the other programs. We can plot that and project it with some of the growth based upon those hazards and the hazard data from various sources, such as the National Weather Service, FEMA, Corps of Engineers, etc. So the purpose of mitigation is to lessen the impact of a storm. Now, again, we can do that before and after. The reason we do it after, again, I'm a pre-mitigation guy, but the reason that money is spent after, and it matters, however we spend it, it's still relevant, and it's still a good thing that we spent that money. The reason being is because we can still work on those programs, and what we do post-disaster may help us to lessen the impact on the next disaster that occurs. And so that's still good. Even though it's spent, on that back end. It also may serve as a prevention. Again, mitigation is to lessen the impact, and prevention is to attempt to prevent it. An example of that is storm surge. So we know hurricanes, tornadoes are going to occur, and we can't prevent those, but what we can do is mitigate the storm surge. And the storm surge is the rain, the flooding, the water that's associated with that hurricane. And so that surge, that water, for example, we can lessen the impact of flooding from that hurricane, such as in New Orleans, by building dams and dikes and levees. If the water goes over those dams, dikes, and levees, then the impact would not be as great as it would have been before had we not built them. Obviously, we try to prevent everything we can. It's not possible to prevent a disaster from every hazard, and it's not always possible to focus on every hazard, which is why we have, you'll see, the all hazards approach. And that is trying to use resource, people, assets, and money to deal with those hazards the best we can from a holistic approach. So it's sort of like building, baking the cake and focusing on the entire cake and trying to use what we have in the kitchen to bake that cake, the refrigerator, etc., versus us having to run to the neighbors and borrow eggs or sugar or whatever. So, not a perfect analogy, but hopefully that helps. So preparedness is just that. Preparedness is preparing a community, people in the community, for the different hazards that occur, whether it's flooding, tornadoes, a winter storm, such as we see in Massachusetts. Whatever that is preparing. And you see the ads at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the State Emergency Management Agency. They'll put ads out. You'll hear the radio ads. You'll see the TV ads. You'll see the bulletin boards. And the whole goal there is to teach you how to educate the public to prepare for a disaster, whatever that may be, whatever emergency could occur. And that could be, from simple things such as, a medical emergency, learning first aid, CPR, to, surviving, stockpiling food, water, and emergency supplies for 48 hours, in a disaster. So all those things are important. Now, it may seem that all of this sort of runs together, and so it's sort of like this rubber band in that it's almost holistic. Without one piece, the other piece doesn't work, and that's the way each one of these are. Mitigation, preparedness, etc. And there's other pieces to this puzzle, if you will. FEMA continues to change that. to address different hazards and threats. There's protection, preparedness, mitigation, prevention, response, and all of these sort of work together. Again, it's like this rubber band or a chain. I don't have a chain to show you, but it's like a chain. Without that one link, if we lose a link, then it really doesn't work together. So that's what we're doing this week. Take a good look at your textbook if you don't mind, and make sure you're well versed on that. Next week we'll take a look at some of the different hazards and accidents in the United States. And I like that chapter as well, but we'll talk about that then. But just know we're almost finished with the class, only a couple weeks left, and then we'll get into some final things. So our discussion this week, and many of you have already started on the discussion, part of protecting the infrastructure. Federal Emergency Management operates the National Cybersecurity Division. Again, this is one of the other divisions within the Department of Homeland Security, and lots of different pieces that's important to be able to protect the infrastructure, especially the cyber infrastructure of the government. They pretty much protect the .gov domain, but also work with the public-private partnership and those different agencies, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector, as I mentioned, in protecting that critical infrastructure that supports the United States government and even local governments and state government as well. So should be a good discussion. I'd like to see you expand upon your knowledge. Make sure that you share your thoughts on that. I know it's been a quick almost 8 weeks now. I hope you've enjoyed the class. I've tried to make it interesting and fun for you, while also teaching, helping you learn. And I hope that's what we've been able to do. Give you just a real good overview of the different parts of Department of Homeland Security. Now, I wish we were together another 8 weeks. We could expand this and make this whole semester discussing different pieces. I hope in the future I'll have an opportunity to teach you again, share a little more in-depth sections on hazards and disasters and what we do to respond to those and prepare. A lot of science involved. With what we do in the Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And when I first started, it wasn't so much, but now there's a lot of science. So anyway, I've bored you enough. You're doing a great job in the class. I appreciate you going the extra mile. If you need me, I want you to send me a text, call me, email me, and I'll do everything I can to help you. Please remember to check your grammar, support what you say with APA citations. Citations are placed before the period, author, comma, year, not after. Include the references if you don't mind. Keep rocking. Use my tips, examples, and tools that I've shared in the announcements to help you. If you don't know, give it a try. I always give credit for trying and doing the best you can. And like I said, if you need help, let me know. So keep rocking, keep moving forward. I'm proud of each and every one of you. I'll see you in the discussion.